Good morning, everyone. We're a couple minutes after, so we'll get started. I am Chris Belden. I am the Director of Planning and Grants for the Duluth Transit Authority. Welcome.
And I am David Clark, the Director of Marketing with the DTA. Just to give you a little background, so we're a 5307 Transit Authority here operating in Duluth and Superior. We've got 247 route miles. We have 21 fixed routes and 77 fixed route buses, 12 paratransit buses, and a number of support vehicles in our system. Today we're going to talk a little bit about a branding campaign that we developed kind of in the midst of the pandemic, something that was on its way anyway, but how we sort of navigated the challenges of communicating with the public and sort of building a value proposition around coming back and bringing transit back into the forefront.
Also throw in, we've got 7 battery electric buses, and we operate in Superior, Wisconsin and Duluth, Minnesota. So joint conference is always fun.
Absolutely.
So this project and this concept really had formulated in the summer of 2020. And what we realized is we had a bunch of projects already programmed. We received a big federal grant to upgrade our fare collection system. We already had programmed to do a comprehensive operations analysis. We had programmed over $2 million in bus stop improvements. So we had a lot of exciting things in the next couple of years, but we thought, why not package them into a branded campaign so that people can really recognize the whole group of projects and exciting initiatives that are coming, so that we stay top of mind and are fresh.
And to kind of separate this concept from a traditional rebrand, it's not like we were changing our logo or our colors or our fonts or the name of our organization. It's just simply packaging some initiatives so that they differentiate.
So branding a specific initiative or project isn't anything new, and it's really been a popular way to get your project recognized. So we've thought of a bunch of different ideas and looked at different agencies, and some of these you probably recognize. And Better Bus Stops in the Twin Cities is one that's been recognized for a number of years now. And then there's specific to bus stop balancing or shelter projects or network redesigns. So with that, we grouped everything together as this Better DTA movement, and underneath that we grouped more specific projects. So the Better DTA movement is the umbrella, and underneath that is Better Bus Stops, Better Technology, and the Better Bus Blueprint, which is our network redesign. And what's nice about this format too is that we can add in things as we go on. So it's kind of a living brand, living document.
So this is how the website navigation interface appears when you're visiting our site on mobile or desktop. And so we kind of engineered it so that you see a menu of things that you can drill into. So when we create a social media post about better technology or a specific element of the campaign, we can send people right to this as a landing page, and then they can navigate from there and drill down to what they're looking for, be it participating in a survey or just learning a little bit about maybe a mobile app or something that we've launched in the process.
And what's nice too is each page, if you go there for our network redesign, you'll see all the different categories on the side of, oh wait, there's more. They're doing stuff with bus stops or mobile app or a number of things. So coming into Better Technology, our first group of projects, I mentioned the fare box updates. So we received a large grant where we replaced our aging fare boxes on the entire fleet. We also introduced mobile ticketing, where we have our own branded app, My DTA. Go check it out. There's some pamphlets around too to learn a little bit more. And with that, we also integrated the transit app, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with. It's in over 200 cities around the world. So it's kind of like the Uber of transit. And what's nice about the My DTA app is we connect to the transit app, but if there were a different app down the road, we can swap that out pretty easily, having our own branded app separately. So there's 2 apps. Transit signal priority on some of our primary corridors. We looked at and we installed transit signal priority systems where our buses can move freely along these corridors, saving us passengers' time and gaining some efficiencies. And later we hope to add this tool called Where's My Bus? And there's an example there that some of you might be familiar with in the Twin Cities. You have a plaque on your bus stop with an ID. You text that in and you get arrival times for the next 3 buses. So another good tool to keep people in the loop of where's that bus, since we're always receiving calls at our customer service folks of that exact question.
And not to jump ahead, but when we do launch our new service next year, we'll be replacing our bus stop signs. So we're going to kind of dovetail that Where's My Bus element into that project, being that there's over 1,000 signs in play with regards to that.
So a little overview of the 2 apps. The MyDTA app primarily functions as a mobile ticketing app. You can manage your account there and buy tickets, where today, if you have a debit card or credit card, you'd have to go to our downtown transit center was your only location. So you'd have to wait in line. It wasn't very convenient. So with this, it's very simple. You can do it anytime, anywhere. Then the transit app is focused on trip planning and real-time bus tracking, gives you step-by-step directions, but we've also embedded the ticketing component in there. So it's got dual purpose.
And when we talk about having 2 apps, there's more than one way to bring a customer into our app ecosystem. So for instance, college students don't need a payment portal or any of those features in our market because we have a UPass program where their student ID is their bus pass. So the transit app is the perfect way for them to take advantage of the system, and it kind of removes some barriers in terms of understanding where buses are and when they're going to arrive, and maybe help students become a little bit more comfortable more quickly with our network. So there's definitely some value there in having that as an entry point and advertising it that way as well.
We've really seen a lot of growth in the app usage, and especially with college coming in too. So
yeah, absolutely. So now we're just going to talk a little bit about how did we advertise these apps and these features of this process, and how do we bring it to life. So we did install 2 half bus wraps, which in the picture here you'll see is called a fusion wrap, and we partner with Halp Media, and they handle our ad sales and our placements on our buses. So this is kind of one way we leveraged existing partnerships to take our dollar a little bit further, because we had a relationship with someone who could develop and install this type of placement for us. Additionally, you may have actually used our Skywalk system, which connects downtown to Canal Park here. So there's hotels obviously across, and the Skywalk network is another place that we advertise a lot. There's a lot of downtown workers, visitors, and a number of other folks that use that corridor. So that was another great spot to kind of present the whole portfolio of projects that we're doing, and then focus on specific aspects. We started by advertising our transit app, which is the first of the 2 that launched earlier this year. And it's just another great way to kind of tease this program and let people check out the website, or just get a quick peek at some of the key items that we're working on or have already completed. Additionally, we installed ads in our bus canopies to complement the exterior ads. These also featured QR codes, which is a great way to get your audience to either take action, like download the app, or learn more about it. And we also created a few alternate versions of this with the intent to keep things fresh and keep people engaged with content. We find that if we look at the same ad over and over, it kind of becomes stale, but even though we're presenting the same message in a different way, you still get people to keep engaging with it and perhaps take action, which is what we're looking for. We also obviously include the App Store logos on all of our ads for these apps, because it kind of provides a cue for people that this is something that they could take action with and download. This was kind of a print piece that we created geared towards both the quick start process for the MyDTA app, and then some info on the transit app as well. This is something that we bring to college fairs and other community touch points to get in the hands of people, so that it takes down that barrier of being afraid to use technology, or maybe not understanding completely how it works. We also, of course, leveraged our social media accounts, both with just simple posts and paid posts, to get the word out about the MyDTA app launch. A number of partners, such as the consultants we worked with and other leaders in the industry, shared our content, and that kind of created a greater than a sum of its parts engagement. And we're really pleased with how that campaign took place. You can't look past local and regional media as well. We do have a number of relationships with TV and radio and other news outlets in our market. So we made sure to really kind of put everything in the pan when it came to getting the word out for the MyDTA app launch initiative. And enjoyed quite a bit of regional and local coverage with regard to that. And then another piece, of course, is pounding the pavement and getting out to the transit center and other key activity centers in our area and asking questions, finding out what people want to know about what we're up to and getting feedback. Is this what they're looking for? Are there ways that we can improve it? We did a series of pop-up events leading up to and during the launch of the MyDTA and the transit apps, and then along with the COA, which we'll get into in a short while here. And that was really proved invaluable. You don't know what you don't know until you talk to the public.
And what was nice too with our whole campaign of the Better DTA movement, we were there specifically for the mobile app, but we were able to talk about the network redesign and any number of issues, because as you folks are probably aware too, you have a tabling event and you hear about everything but the thing you're there for. So it was a nice way to reconnect with folks too and really get an understanding of how things are working throughout the system and any issues somebody might have, but also just to have that presence too was welcomed.
Mm-hmm. And it seems too that a lot of folks are just a couple questions being answered away from turning from a skeptic or somebody who might have a problem with what you're up to someone who gets it and wants to get involved or start using what you're offering.
Especially with a mobile app, sometimes it might be intimidating or people feel they're not tech savvy and that it would be difficult to understand. But once we showed it to them, opened it and went through the steps, they were surprised at just how intuitive and easy, and their trust level really elevated and brought them on board, which is really beneficial for all of us.
And what's even more fun than launching a campaign is measuring the outcomes, and using data-driven tools to kind of articulate where you're at is really helpful. We did that when we looked at download patterns. If you look at this particular chart here, the big peak towards the end there is right on the heels of all the social engagement we did recently at local colleges and in the community. So we saw kind of an immediate return on our time invested in getting the word out for the apps.
So next up of the series of projects under the umbrella is Better Bus Stops. And this one has two subcomponents to it. And the first one is investments. And we already had started this, but hadn't been really loud about it. And some people didn't know if they weren't on one of these corridors or used one of these bus stops, they might not have seen the change. So we wanted to, again, let people know that we've been replacing many of our bus shelters that were from the 1970s and 80s. So you can imagine just how beat up those got in the Duluth climates. And then we've got even more shelters that we're doing this year and next year. Then we've got some of these bus stop seats that you see, this blue seat there as an example in Portland, but we've got ones that are identical where we just need to pour some concrete, and it fits nicely in areas where you've got space constraints or it doesn't quite trigger ridership levels to warrant a shelter quite yet. We've also piloted solar lights in some of our shelters, and we weren't quite sure how that would go with our long, dark winter nights, but it's turned out quite well. So we're going to expand upon that. People have really liked it, especially our drivers, that they can clearly see from a long distance away that somebody's sitting in the shelter, make sure they don't get missed. And we're planning over $2 million in other bus stop improvements over the next 5 years. The other piece of this is bus stop balancing. How many of you have heard of bus stop balancing or consolidation? Yes, it's becoming more and more popular as a way to become more efficient. And we've got 1,700 bus stops throughout our service area. It's generally about every block, which on our popular routes, we're literally stopping every block and people are ripping their hair out. So including our drivers. So we're looking to space that out according with best practices, but also looking locally too, because we do have snow management issues and hills to navigate. So we're really, that's where the word balancing comes in. There's a lot of things to balance when you're looking at consolidation, but there's a lot of benefits that come with that of improving travel time and reliability. There's operational cost savings, less pollution and noise, and it's really going to help us target those investments a lot easier. Give you an idea of a couple of recent projects we had. I'll let Dave talk a little bit more about this one since you worked directly with it.
Yeah, sure. So we partnered with students at the University of Minnesota Duluth in their fine art program And they really wanted to focus on a project that created a sense of place and placemaking within the neighborhood. And this particular project is kind of, it might be slightly difficult to see just from this photo, but it's kind of a collage of silhouettes of animals. And this is in the Lincoln Park Craft District. Many of you may or may not have visited it while you're here, but it's kind of a up and coming district with new restaurants and retail stores and places to buy beverages. But this kind of harkens to the wild, undeveloped nature of what was there before civilization and humans. So that was their kind of artist statement. And they installed this in 4 shelters in partnership with the local printer in the neighborhood. And this is kind of almost a proof of concept that partnerships like this can really improve the landscape in a neighborhood. And it's certainly been a conversation piece and appreciated by a lot of the folks that live in and frequent the neighborhood.
Yeah, and this, at first there might have been a little skepticism of doing something like this, of how well will the material hold up and will there be vandalism or anything like that. And so far they've been up for a few months and it's been a very successful project. Another one in the same district, because of all the construction that you unfortunately had to drive through to get here, there's been a number of changes in the adjacent neighborhood where they moved a bike trail onto Superior Street, which is the main street that runs through this neighborhood. And they put the Duluth's first 2-way protected bike lane in there, which then moved our bus stops all around. And as part of that, we got our first floating bus stops. So we stop in lane and we put these new shelters with the art in there. And it's working really well so far. So the big one is the Better Bus Blueprint. And also, some of you are familiar with the term comprehensive operations analysis. The public doesn't know what that means, so we had to brand this something or we'd lose them right away. And we hired Kinetics Transportation Group out of Chicago to help us on this. And really what we did was a deep dive into our existing system. We learned what were we doing well, what didn't we do so well, and we looked at some COVID impacts and trying to adjust our system to meet the new realities. So we started off defining guiding principles through a number of, through our stakeholder committees and with the public and internally, and we came up with these to help be our North Star as we move through this whole project. So we really needed to be equitable. We wanted to attract the greatest number of area residents onto the system, expand out access to opportunity. So getting to places of employment, education, healthcare, grocery, and so on, improving the passenger experience, becoming more resilient and scalable, which we learned, especially through the last year, is we really need a system that's scalable and can shift at a moment's notice if needed. Deploying resources efficiently and providing a community-inspired solution where they really stood behind and got excited for what's to come. So what goes into route planning? Many of you already know this, but a big component of this was educating the public, because there's a lot of different trade-offs that go into route design. And you've got to think of, where does the bus go? How often does it come? What days does it operate, and how far do you have to walk to access it? So we, through our website and a lot of our materials, really try to get the community to understand the decision-making that goes into a network redesign. One of the components we dived into our existing ridership, we looked at 2019 October numbers, and then we looked at pandemic numbers as well to see what some of the changes were. So most of the data we tried to look pre-pandemic, hoping those numbers would come back, and who knows if it will. But just give you an example here of some of our routes we looked into. We've got a number of select routes or select period sort of specialty service, and there wasn't a whole lot of return for those sort of services, whereas our core routes along our primary corridors really were strong. Then we looked at, where is our ridership coming from? Where is the activity? And we really found it's in these 5 neighborhoods or these core areas. And it made up over 2/3 of our total ridership numbers. So connecting and really focusing on on these neighborhoods and in between these neighborhoods was really important. We looked at all kinds of census data and demographic data and ridership and you name it. We've got our reports online on our website. They're like 200 pages each. So if you really want to get nerdy and dive down deep, it's impressive stuff. But we looked at population density and where the major job distribution was throughout the area. And then we combined some of that into transit propensity. So we took some different demographic categories and created this sort of algorithm where we identified neighborhoods that had high potential for transit ridership and where low ridership potential was, where we might put a lot of service into some neighborhoods, but we're not going to get a lot in return. And then we combined that with latent demand where we already had service, and we were able to identify whether we had too much service or too little service, and it helped us identify areas of opportunity. A really cool feature of this study was we were able to get location-based service data, so cell phone data where it's tracking you. We were able to look pre-pandemic to see what these origins and destinations were. And you'll see, let's see if the mouse works here. This is downtown Duluth, which obviously a major focus of the city. It's kind of right in the middle of it, and had been built in an earlier area, actually around the streetcar system. So we have a fairly strong downtown. And then I lost the mouse. Oh, there we go. This is the Miller Hill Mall area, and this is UMD. And then of course Superior over here. And then you look at numbers in 2020, and that all changed. And downtown really wasn't much of a focus anymore. The Miller Hill Mall area certainly was, where a lot of essential employees were going. Also a lot of retail where people were looking for that toilet paper and in their groceries. So that really took up a lot of the share of the travel patterns. And that's constantly shifting too. And it'd be interesting to keep looking to see what it looks like today. Through a community survey, one interesting thing came out. We asked, how much did you ride pre-COVID? And then how much do you think you're gonna ride post-COVID? And we did see that there is a drop. There were 89% of almost daily riders would continue, but that other 11% would drop down into sometimes a week, depending on if they were working at home 2 or 3 days out of the week. So things are going to change, we expect. Through this, we really identified what the new network should do. And it's these 4 points that we should provide attractive and more reliable transit service to as many people as possible. Again, being adaptive and scalable. We've had labor shortages, just like many of you, where we have to pull routes off every once in a while and put them back in. So that was important. Improving access and travel times. And we were able to model this. I'll show that here soon. And then being consistent all days of the week. We heard a lot that our system was confusing, and we have high levels of service during the week, but then on Saturdays and Sundays, it drops off significantly. So to help us do this, we created 2 scenarios where one concept was really focused on high frequency on these cores. And then concept 2 was more balanced, where we still had a decent amount of coverage service. And then from that, we evaluated those 2 through a number of modeling strategies. And we created a draft network out of that, or a preferred alternative, where we took the best of both concepts. This is overwhelming, right? This is our existing network, all of our routes. Each line shows how or what hours of operation there are, and the colors correlate with frequency. We offer scattered frequencies and patterns. We've got different routes, and then it does different things at different times of the day, or sometimes they don't run at all on Saturdays and Sundays. So to new riders, it was really complex and confusing to try to understand the system. This is what we have come up with, a much more consistent system where it operates, every route operates every day of the week. more consistent patterns or frequencies. And what we did is it looks like we cut a lot of routes, but what we did is combine several routes where today our downtown is right in the middle of routes and we interline. So one route comes in as a number 2 and then it turns into a 6, and you might have to take both to get to your end destination, but that's really hard to try to explain to somebody.
And when you talk about generating buy-in from your team, from a operators or customer service perspective, when you have a more consistent frequency and span, and you have more easy to read schedules, it's definitely a much better scenario for people that are trying to explain the system or teach the system to new people. So that was a nice win as we were explaining what we had proposed to our team as well.
And this has been great visual for the public where they can look at this and understand what we're looking to change right away. It was easy to comprehend. So a core feature of our network redesign is what we're calling pre-BRT. We don't have capital funding to do those components, but we do have the resources to implement the frequency now. So why wait for the big bang project? We're going to put this in as soon as possible. The blue dash line there is our existing high frequency corridors, which have many routes overlapping each other. So they're not consistent headways, meaning a bus coming every 15 minutes. They might be one after another and then a break of 25 minutes or so. We've expanded this network by 8 miles, and we did all kinds of evaluation to see what does access to this new high frequency system look like. And equity was a huge part of our guiding principles. So we evaluated that component and we increased access, so that being about a 3-block distance or quarter-mile distance away from these routes, equity populations had 40% more access to this.
Some of you may be wondering, since this is also kind of a branding presentation, how we're going to be delineating or branding each of these routes. But our preliminary idea so far is that the route that runs parallel to the lake will be the blue line, hearkening to the water, and then the one that runs up the hill perpendicular will be the green line because it runs through like a grassier area as opposed to along the lake. So just that's kind of our initial thinking along those lines.
The blue line there, that's today 2 separate routes, and we might as well combine it into one route and does the same thing all day, every day, so that people can really understand again how to navigate the system. Something we looked at was travel time improvements. So we, in the top right there, you'll see a map where we put points all over a map, and then we modeled what the average time would be to get between all of these points. Huge modeling effort, but we were able to compare that to our existing system and saw that there was almost 25% travel time improvement system-wide. We saw that 37% of trips improve significantly. Because we are reducing our amount of coverage service in low density areas where we saw very low ridership, which meant some people would have to walk further to get to a bus stop, we only saw that 1.5% of trips experience significant worsening travel time. So of course, with any network redesign, there's a lot of trade-offs, and we were really happy with this. Give you an example of what that looks like from downtown Duluth. And these are average times. So just walking out of your door, not going off of a schedule, walking to the bus, being on the bus, making transfers if you need to. We compared our existing system, and then on the right is what the new network should be doing. And we were able to drop down those travel times and wait times significantly across the board. Really impressive numbers, and even our consultant was just blown away by how much better this will get. And our system actually performs quite well. So today, and we were surprised we were able to get so much more out of it by really streamlining things. Then we looked at quality transit area of how much area you can access within an hour's amount of time, hour travel time. And we were able to model that out of, again, all these different points and putting in a schedule based on our frequencies. And people are now going to be able to access a lot more than they were before. On weekdays, there's a 28 square mile improvement where that's many more jobs a person could access within a half hour or an hour, which at the end of the day is exactly what transit is there for. This is a map kind of illustrating that for the Miller Hill Mall area, which of course is growing in its importance for us in terms of our ridership, taking on a larger share since our downtown is kind of dropping a little bit. There's a 44% increase of quality transit area.
And while we were trying to communicate this, we recognized that some of the terminology here and the concepts can be kind of esoteric and confusing. So we took slices of infographics like this and dedicated social media posts throughout the awareness campaign when we were looking to generate feedback from the public, and just kind of focused on the equity piece or the travel time improvement piece, and let people make comments and answer questions on these individual concepts, which we felt, number one, we learned quite a bit from in terms of sentiment and what questions people had, but it was nice to kind of give the general public bite-sized pieces of this broader concept so that they could gain an understanding of what we had proposed. And in terms of the social media campaign that corresponded to this, we definitely did a series of posts every single day for a few weeks, and some of them talked about the routes themselves, what routes were going to be serving the existing routes under the new proposed draft network, and then those attributes of the improvement or the changes that would take place. And some of them generated a lot of organic likes and shares and participation, and others we boosted just to try to solicit more people to go to the website. The call to action here throughout this whole campaign was to go to the draft network website, where you could look at an interactive overview of the current route, current conditions versus proposed conditions, and then go to route specific sections and make comments based on whether you liked the proposed network or had other feedback.
And with that outreach, it was really important to be clear and direct and transparent on what the changes are, because we are reducing routes in certain areas, and we needed to be upfront about that. While that attracted some negative feedback, but we wanted as many people to know and be aware of what we were proposing as possible, so we could make adjustments or give those people ample time to think of alternatives.
And as many of you may have experienced through similar undertakings, there was no shortage of negative feedback, but that doesn't tell the whole story. There's plenty of people who were very supportive, and sometimes that can be a challenge when you're trying to tell the story about the feedback to internal stakeholders. But just in the world of public opinion, that's the reality that we experienced, and I don't think we're alone in that regard. This campaign, much like the other one, we did really spread the word as much as we could locally and regionally, and we're also lucky enough to garner some coverage from some industry thought leaders and other stakeholders outside of our own network, and that's always kind of a fun byproduct of that, to see a broader conversation and see how people are talking about this in the context of what other networks have done and other agencies in terms of similar projects. So kind of putting this all together, what did we learn here? What would we do differently? What would we share as some ideas? And so talking about the Better DTA movement as a kind of a portfolio of projects and initiatives, when you're at the forefront of this, it can be kind of daunting and confusing. How do I put all these projects into silos? How do I develop a place for people to visit them and unpack them? And how do I get the content right and make sure that it's going to hit the mark and not be overwhelming and confusing? We learned that by really thoughtfully putting things in categories and spreading the word about them and organizing them in what we thought was a useful way, that it was worth the effort to kind of create a package of projects and brand them all together throughout the process.
And to that point too, we hope this is useful for all of you, because I'm sure many of you have exciting projects all programmed too. And this is something anybody could kind of copy and paste of, let's package everything we're trying to do and put it in a simple, easy to understand way for the public to understand. Another lesson learned is leaning into generating that stakeholder feedback, and great ideas came from everywhere. We held 2 driver focus groups and a driver survey. We had stakeholder committees and some really robust public engagement, especially meeting people at our transit center hearing things on the ground and having some lengthy conversations about things that are working or not working so well. So through that, even after our draft network, we did modify a number of things to better serve after some of the feedback. And it was a great experience.
And looking at all the different stakeholders, both external and internal, when we were launching our mobile app and initiating our new Farebox project, getting the buy-in from your team, from operations to customer service to maintenance ahead of time, so that there's a clear internal understanding of where the project is headed, what it's going to mean to each person. I mean, that was invaluable, because that's naturally going to generate feedback as well, even as an accident, because you're telling people what's happening, and naturally they're going to have their own ideas about it too. And then leveraging owned assets. We talked a little bit about this, how we decided to really promote our campaign within our own buses and on the outside of our buses. That can seem rather obvious, but I think sometimes we lose sight of the fact that we have ways that are low cost or no cost that are within our facilities and within our network, and relationships that we have with local media or local partners, other community organizations, to get the word out. And we definitely found that to be invaluable in this process.
Something that's important is to consider timelines too. And we learned this at one point where we announced the Better DTA movement. We put out a press release, and crickets. Well, a couple of days before, we made some route changes, and that got all the attention. So the local media didn't want to bombard with transit news, and we get great coverage from our local partners, but they were too close together. So making sure these really big initiatives are spaced out just enough so that people can capture them all, but really be impressed with the volume of changes that are coming.
Yeah, it kind of harkens to the concept of information fatigue, or the news outlets aren't going to keep putting the same organization at the top story level unless it's particularly compelling. So having the right partners, so in the RFP process or wherever the juncture is where you build a partnership with a consultant or third-party vendor, having the right ones is excellent. I mean, we have a lot of competing priorities in our roles, and a lot of these vendors have done these projects before. They have experience in other markets doing them, and there was areas we were able to really lean on them and find documents or approaches to things or ways of describing things that they had already created prior to working with us. And then also just finding people that are reliable and can help you keep the project moving and collaborate effectively was key across all these projects.
Another takeaway is research and learn from others. Don't be afraid to borrow. I mean, we're not directly competing with each other, and we're all have the similar mission or same mission. And a lot of agencies have already put a lot of thought into branding and naming and packaging these things. So for us, coming up with this was fairly easy, where we were naming our COA and ended up just wrapping it all into a big one. And the term better, I mean, it's everywhere. There's several better bus projects or better bus stops or whatever, but it's really clear and easy to communicate. The public can resonate with that easily. If, okay, something's changing here, it's going to be better, better than it was yesterday. So, which I think is really important as we come out of this pandemic, letting people know that we've made significant improvements. And the last time you rode with us might have been pre-pandemic, and what you're coming back to is hopefully better than it was.
Absolutely. So this idea that there is something for everybody, but not every component will benefit every user. What I'm getting to here is the college students in our network don't need the MyDTA mobile app. So messaging to them it's going to fall on deaf ears and be ineffective. And while we have one branded portfolio of projects, there's different customer segments that are going to, that different messages will resonate with. And to that end, you have to be conscious when you're thinking about what your audience is and what's going to connect with them. So one message is a good sort of broad approach, but tailoring things when you do tabling events or community stakeholder engagement to who the end user likely is definitely worth the extra effort.
And change is hard, right? I mean, anytime any of you have proposed change, I'm sure it's you're really shaking the hornet's nest. And with that comes a lot of objections, especially for who something might get worse for, and who it might be benefiting. They might not be coming out as loud screaming at the top of their lungs that they love this, but the person who's losing something or changing or they're fearful of, they'll be loud. So try to educate and clearly explain the benefits so that they really understand. And we were able to do that through an interactive website with our network changes, with a sliding scale, so you could really dive into the routes and zoom in and out, and some background of what it takes. So I think through that, the public really kind of understood. Plus with COVID, everything, the whole world's changing. And I feel like if there was ever a time for change, it's right now, where the whole world is just constantly, you don't know what to expect tomorrow. So I think it makes it a little bit easier of, okay, the rest of the world's changing. Of course, my transit network will be changing as well. And with that, we've heard from several folks this conference already about that change, and really looking at who are your core riders, who's been with you the whole time. And you can spend a lot of resources chasing after the so-called choice riders, and they might come back for 2 days a week, but still it's going to be a really uphill battle. But where is that core of your service now? And they've probably been underserved as well. So if you can better serve them, there's still a lot of room to grow and get that ridership from places that already exist.
Absolutely. So we have about 15 minutes left, give or take, and we're hoping that there's some questions or people want to share some stories about things that they've experienced kind of along these lines. Question askers do get a limited edition collectible chip clip or DTA safety light. So there is a little carrot as far as questions go. So who's ready? Yes, you sir.
Hey everybody, Trevor from the CAC. First off, this is my first month on the job, so this has been such a valuable session for me. Just to see the great work that you've done. I definitely will be taking your lessons and advice and bringing it back home. So thank you. My question is about timing, not about necessarily timing like sharing the good work that you're doing, but from the moment you all went into the room and said, we got to do something big and different and tell our story, to being here at this conference talking about all the good work that's been done. What would you say is the flow of the work? You know, how did you really get started? What was the catalyst, and what did you go along with implementation?
I think what really kicked it off is we were already drafting the Better Bus Stops thing, working on this bus stop balancing project. And then we had this comprehensive operations analysis, and it needed a name. We couldn't call it that. We'd lose everybody. So that was the catalyst, and timelines moving forward. You've got to be nimble because there's all kinds of changes, and especially with everything right now, sometimes there were some stops and starts, but being clear about those. And it's kind of a race against the clock as well, because we're looking at launching this new network next summer, and there's a lot of components we need to get in place, a lot of marketing materials and new hand schedules, new signs, programming everything, scheduling it. I mean, it's going to be overwhelming, but it can't come soon enough just based on ridership and meeting the demands that are there, but we just can't react fast enough to meet current needs. But yeah, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, in a perfect world, you can work backwards from some launch date or deadline, but again, it's kind of a dynamic situation in transit. A lot of us wear a lot of hats, and there's a lot of competing priorities. So I think it's just really keeping your eye on the ball and making sure that you're spreading things out and your resources out proportionally in terms of who can do the lifting on the promotion, who can button up the last punch list of deliverables on the project, and keeping clear, open communication between everybody that's kind of a project stakeholder on who's got what capacity, how can we come together on this. And it's often borrowing resources from other team members in terms of their time, and just kind of collaborating to do what it takes to get it done. So.
But it was really working backwards, setting, okay, this is when we hope to launch. And the reason we're looking at June because we need the summer is kind of a softer period for us. So we're looking at it as sort of a soft launch, because we're doing completely new schedules. There's gonna be some kinks in there that we need to work out over the summer. So working backwards from that, it all kind of fell into place.
Start with
Is there a walkability assessment with the Better Bus Stop element? And then if there is, for the surrounding area that isn't under, TTA's jurisdiction, or the sidewalk go and the coordinating with the city on any improvements?
Yes. All the way to the ground level, starting at a high level overview of where our routes are. And some of our routes were on streets that didn't have any sidewalks. And so, and of course, we didn't get any ridership from those areas. So some of those routes we're pulling back and eliminating, but where there are still routes and considering the bus stop balancing, we really had to take into account the adjacent land uses where there are higher density residential units, where there are persons with disabilities nearby, community centers, grocery stores, you name it. And then the pedestrian network was a big piece of that, and safety. So, and what does the adjacent roadway look like? What are the traffic volumes? What are the speeds? What does that safety look like? Is there alternatives if the sidewalk is covered in snow, which, surprise, happens all the time here. So is there a shoulder to walk in or some alternative? So there's a lot of different factors in there. The city of Duluth is unrolling a new snow management plan this winter that we're hopeful that the sidewalks have are maintained to a better level than they had in the past. This actually helps us too, because now we have fewer bus stops, which are easier to maintain. Some of them we do maintain ourselves, or the city does. So in terms of not having clearly marking no parking and being able to get up to the curb and some of those things, we're really looking with a fresh lens to improve those things as well. And through that, we're just about to put that out to the public, our bus stop balancing, where we're looking for a lot of feedback if there are residents with mobility needs, or we missed out on a community location that's important. We're going to reevaluate our plan and make adjustments to our bus stops, where some still will be just a block apart because there's too important of destinations that are next to each other where we can't ask people to walk, but then trying to space out where we can. So again, it's a huge balancing act, and it's, if you undertake it, give yourself enough time to really be thoughtful with that process.
One of the uniqueness of Duluth is you're great. Bus stop, yeah. Taking out a bus stop, assuming the folks who were in between stop, they're not taking. Who look this up? And see how we're at that. Here, school policy. So I was curious, how was it all? Whether
Great question. For the hills, we adopted a bus stop policy a couple of years ago that identified that where anything above 5% had a shorter distance of spacing. So depending on the hill, they're still sometimes a block apart. And that, especially in some of our hillside communities, there's a lot of folks who don't have access to a vehicle. So that's a big barrier for mobility around our community. So we wanted to make sure that, especially on hills, people still had that access where they're not sliding down the hill or falling to try to get to the new bus stop. So again, having to be really thoughtful of what our topography is like.
Get some slides that have some fantastic efficiencies that are going to be rolled out with this. I'm curious, is that projected to result in lowering your fleet and overall operation and maintenance costs?
That is a great question. So I should have mentioned this earlier on. It's a budget neutral plan, and we're seeing a little bit of savings, but we've reallocated. So we're about 1% within our existing budget in service hours. So in terms of our roster, we haven't scheduled it out yet to know how many drivers we'll need, which we predict will be about the same. But our peak vehicle fleet is dropping significantly, where I think we're about 63 buses right now, and we're going to drop down to like 42 peak buses. So, and that's what we have right now, just modeled out. Once we do the scheduling, we'll really know. But there could be some changes, and they're not all quite realized yet. But there will be some changes, yeah. But what that does too is shifts vehicles around to other days of the week. So our weekend service levels, we've amplified over 25%. So we're going to have a lot more vehicle needs on days where we were pretty light before. So it's a big moving around of everything, really. It's shifting things to different areas. So some of it's kind of hard to identify what the future is going to look like. So we'll know in the coming months with scheduling. Yeah, so impacts on paratransit. We looking at ridership served in areas where we reduce routes. We're still serving 98, 99% of our existing ridership and reallocating those resources into more concentrated areas. Sorry, what was the question? I forgot already. Oh, paratransit, yes, yes. So looking at ridership in areas with our 3/4 mile buffer. And so we service all the full city of Duluth with paratransit. So no changes there. There's very minimal changes in, say, Proctor and Hermantown and our outer areas. But there are significant improvements on span of service on the weekends, especially in Superior, Wisconsin, where weekend and evening service for paratransit is going to get significantly better. We're not sure what that'll do in terms of ridership, of how many folks will actually be riding late into the evening or on the weekends. We don't anticipate it to be very significant. It's kind of a wait and see, and throw the pandemic on top of it all too. We're not sure what that'll do. So again, it's kind of a lot of unknowns that we're getting into, but from our modeling, we're confident that it'll be better than where we're at today.
So any other questions, or anybody want to share any similar scenarios that they've been a part of, or has anybody else done kind of a branded campaign around some projects like this? It's, yeah, you know, when you go to launch these apps, they generally predict that you'll receive a higher volume of calls around how do I use the app, or in the case of the mobile payment app, how do I fix this problem I created for myself, or whatever it may be. But in terms of customer service calls around scheduling and some of the generally, frequently asked questions and those sorts of questions, I don't think we've really seen an increase in those types of calls, but it's hard to say if there is a decrease because we don't explicitly track the nature of the call down to that like granular level, I guess. Yes.
So I'm curious what kind of material you used on that shelter with that design. Some kind of a wrap and you can feel that.
Yeah, so it's a 3-ply wrap, vinyl with 2 layers of coating on it, and it is peel resistant and scuff and graffiti resistant as well. If someone was determined enough, they could peel it off, but it's not like you can just sit there with your fingernail and easily remove it. So I could, if you're curious, I could get you the exact application that we used.
Yeah, I am curious if we're between our downtown area.
Sure, certainly.
acknowledgement from. Yeah, so there's a few large companies who sell this data, and basically it comes from all these apps where you accept the terms and conditions you probably don't read. So well, maybe you do, but most people don't. So there's robust data out there, and why we did that over just a traditional origin and destination survey is your sample size is so small, and you're not capturing as large of the public moving around at large. So it was really helpful to just determine where is everybody moving about. And we got some specific numbers. Now we didn't get any like, where's their house? It came in larger geographic areas of neighborhoods. So nothing specific, couldn't tie to any individual person. It's all legal and stuff, but and I know MnDOT has some great tools. I think they use streetlights where same thing. I forget which provider or consultant used for it, but it's really incredible the sort of data you can get out there that can really help in your decision making of where are people moving about, not just on our buses. We already understand that, but what are we missing? Where are people really trying to get to? And how do they get there? What roads are they taking? And maybe we need to put a route along that roadway that's becoming more and more popular. Luckily, Duluth isn't a rapidly growing city and our suburban areas aren't really expanding. So it was more predictable, but for any of your areas that are growing in suburbanization, I imagine that location-based data would be extremely useful. Of course.
Also, when you were showing the graphic that illustrated all different overlays, right? Sort of map out all the possible communication routes. That's the point, you know. How many drivers can access 30 minutes?
So we created a GTFS file with routes and draft schedules of just our frequencies. And then we put that into a GIS program with our routes, and then designated, I think it was 20 something points around the whole region. And then ran a model of any time of the day or day of the week, and the complete trip, so taking sidewalks to the bus stop, transfers, all of that, throughout the draft network with the routes, and came out with this. And we were able to compare that to what we have now. The feature is isochrones, where you can really dive in and show this kind of a heat map of how far you can get. There's some great tools out there, great planning tools that are coming out. One that we use is called Remix. And there's this feature called Jane, where you can drop her at any location and kind of see how far can Jane get within 15 minutes or a half hour, those sort of things. So it's really a great tool to communicate the value of transit, how long it's going to take to get somewhere and how many things you have access to. So it's really impressive the amount of information that's come out in the last 5 years that can help better understand such a complex network, because really a lot of systems focus on a route going from a neighborhood to their downtown. And what we're seeing everywhere is that's not as important as it was before. And we really needed to think of it as a network. How does a route complement another route and another route? People aren't just going downtown. So through this modeling, we were able to really see, and through our scenarios of how are people going to be able to move around our entire metro area easier, and take the best and put it back together, model it again, and we're really happy with the results. And doing this modeling was really important to be able to communicate the benefits to the public, because we're reducing the number of routes. And if you just look at that on a surface level, it's like, whoa, you're cutting half of your routes. What are you doing? But being able to show these benefits in a new way was critical to getting community buy-in and buy-in from our board of directors to approve the plan.
All right, well, we're a minute over, so thanks for joining us, everyone, today. Appreciate you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Got it.
Same here, I always carry some of my wallet.
Yeah.
I do some stuff eventually, but yeah. Okay, yeah, I think we talked once or twice. Doug, did you ever meet him before you? I didn't meet him, no. Okay, I did his predecessor. I think he either moved to. Yeah. Yeah, he's back there. Okay. I went to St. Cloud State. Okay. And I'm the other way around. School up here.